When we talk about individual resiliency training, this is a specific intervention that is specific to the New Journey's first episode psychosis model. And let me just give you a little introduction about myself and how I came into this a little bit. So for those of you that don't know, I'd spent about 5 years on a PACT team down in Vancouver, Washington. And from there, I helped our agency launch our first episode, New Journey's first episode psychosis team. And was a program director there for about 3.5, 4 years. And during my time as a program director for New Journeys, I was also doing the majority of all the intakes for PACT as well as New Journeys. And what I kind of began to notice during that time is New Journeys has very specific criteria for eligibility in regards to really identifying these individuals that meet that criteria for a first episode psychosis. And there was many of them that didn't quite meet the eligibility criteria for New Journeys, but would still meet eligibility criteria for PACT. And so I began enrolling a lot of these individuals into our PACT program. And what I started working with some of the clinicians on the team and realizing is that a lot of the material and content that was specific to New Journeys would be really beneficial for some of the new clients that were still very young on these PACT teams. And we've also noticed, just kind of through fidelity reviews and doing some consultation with your teams, is we're really beginning to notice there are more teams that are beginning to see a much younger population onto your guys' PACT teams. And it's important to keep in mind that with this younger population, they are not always as complex as traditional PACT clients when it comes to kind of those wide variety of kind of psychosocial challenges that a lot of our long-term PACT clients have. And so what I want to do is I want to kind of talk a little bit about individual resiliency training today, talk about the intervention itself, and talk a little bit about how to identify a client that might be appropriate for IRT. I'm just going to go with IRT. That's kind of the acronym that you use. And just so you guys are aware, this is a specific module-based tool that really should only be being done by the team leads or MHPs. There's a lot of great work within IRT that other team members could be supporting the MHPs in doing, but this really is an intervention specifically for the team leads and MHPs. Just briefly, I want to just talk about a little bit of objectives today, and what I'm hoping for you guys to kind of gain from today is I just want to show you kind of the practical side of where do we gain access to the IRT modules, and then also kind of have a little bit of a conversation on what would some consultation and further conversations look as you begin to identify some of these clients that might be a good fit for IRT. Secondly, is just recognize the type of PACT clients that are going to be appropriate for the IRT modules, and then really talk about and explain the importance of helping a client kind of better understand what is resiliency and what impact does that have in their road to recovery and moving forward. So it is definitely kind of important to kind of get a sense of where these New Journey programs are. If you look on the left, this is just a map of the current PACT teams across the state of Washington. And on the right is the New Journey teams across the state of Washington. And when our agency launched our team, I want to say it was back in 2018, I think is when we started, 2018 or 2019. We were the fifth team in the state of Washington. And so you can see over the years that New Journeys is absolutely growing. And you'll notice that a lot of these same agencies that are running PACT teams are also running New Journey teams. This is probably not a surprise to many of you, but it's really important to kind of keep that in mind, because when we think of PACT clients, they're traditional clients that have been in the mental health system for many years, and sometimes it can take quite a while for them to find a PACT team. And I can recall talking with many families over the years when they find a PACT team and we get their loved ones admitted to a PACT team. I remember hearing family members saying quite often, why did it take us so long to find you guys? And what's fantastic about New Journeys is, although a lot of these individuals may not be meeting eligibility criteria for New Journeys, they are meeting it for PACT. So you guys are over time are going to begin to see much more of a younger population coming onto your team, really the important part about that is we're getting these individuals into the mental health system and getting those wraparound supports at a much younger age than we would traditionally see them on a PACT team. So really excited about that, and hopefully your teams are beginning to kind of notice kind of that trajectory, and even maybe beginning to get a handful of referrals from the new journey teams as maybe some of these clients are needing an increased level of care. I just want to briefly mention this. So this is what's referred to as Navigate. And Navigate is what is considered a coordinated specialty care program. This is one of a handful of different coordinated specialty care programs across the United States. The state of Washington and our New Journeys teams utilize the Navigate coordinated specialty care. And the best way to describe a coordinated specialty care program is consider it like a PACT light program, meaning it encompasses more of that comprehensive wraparound team, but done on a much smaller scale. A lot of the same individual roles in regards to employment and education specialists, peer supports, MHPs, nurses for some teams, and case managers. But it's very much done on a much smaller scale than our traditional full-size PACT teams. And within the Navigate model and within the coordinated specialty care is where we find embedded within that the IRT specific modules that are very specific for the therapy approach that we're going to be using for first episode psychosis, and hopefully potentially for some of the clients that you're going to be working with. What I want to do is I just want to kind of show you specifically where you can find these specific modules. So hopefully this works. Bear with me. So Whitney, if you'll just put in that website, the uwspiritlab.org, hopefully this website's pretty familiar to most of you. This is just our Spirit Lab website in regards to all things Spirit Lab, whether it's our CBTP side, our New Journeys, or our PACT side, and some of our family education side. So if you just put that website into the link at the bottom, you'll see our PACT side that has a lot of our resources for the PACT programs. And over here is our early psychosis program. So if you just click that link, it'll open up. Are you guys seeing that, Whitney? Okay. And you'll just scroll down. It's just addressing psychosis and kind of our resources for first episode teams. And what you want to do is just go down over to resources and just click down for clinicians. And on this page, you are going to find all things Navigate, all the specific Navigate modules for all this various roles within the team. And if you just look down, you'll see individual resiliency training manual. For those of you that are familiar with IMR or EIMR, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities with IRT and EIMR. Very much module-based, a handful of various topics within each specific module. I'm just going to open the module and just kind of walk through this a little bit with you guys. And so when we look at this first module, it's this binder, if you print it out, it's probably about that thick. So it has thousands of pages. And what I want to do is just kind of look at through some of this a little bit, and we'll go into a little more detail on how it applies to some of the specific clients. But the first part of this is just clinical guidelines specific to you as the clinician in regards to what are some strategies, what are the goals, what is some overview on how I describe or roll out some of the content within IRT. It talks about specific goals. It gives you the specific handouts working with clients. And it just gives you specific clinical guidelines. This is for you as the clinician. This is not something that you would be sharing with a client. This is something that prior to a session, or as you get more familiar with some of the modules and get more familiar with some of the clinical guidelines, it's just really good information to review before going over some of the more client-centered handouts. It gives you an overview of the various topics that you'll be addressing in each specific topic. It gives you kind of an agenda. So if I have a client who might be having some challenges with some symptoms or might have some cognitive impairments, it kind of tells me how I should pace my sessions. Or if I'm having a client that's really doing really well and they're kind of motivated to want to keep working, it can increase the pace of the content that I'm the clinical handouts also provide just really basic teaching strategies. What are some things that I need to be mindful of as I'm going through a handful of different topics and strategies? Provides tips for just some challenges. If I have a client who may not be endorsing some of the things that I'm talking about in the topic, how do I have a conversation about that with them anyway? Back to my PowerPoint. And we'll go through this more in detail and through more of some of these specific modules to get further into our didactic training. So like I said, each specific module has very specific clinical guidelines and has very specific client handouts on how to walk through each of the specific modules. When we talk about more specifically, I want to talk a little bit about more just interventions and the goals within each specific module. So be mindful that each specific intervention and goal within each topic is really to provide individuals with very specific education about psychosis and really assist them in kind of processing their experience. Be mindful that with this younger population, that initial episode of psychosis or those initial experiences that we would deem as psychotic experiences are really fresh and fairly new for a lot of these young individuals. More of our long-term PACT clients, many of them probably couldn't even go back and talk about that very first time that they experienced a psychotic episode because it's so much of their normal everyday life. So very much IRT is really much focusing on let's have a conversation. Let's talk about this early experience that you had. We're going to develop a very specific relapse plan. We're going to talk about increasing resiliency. What does that actually mean for your long-term recovery? And really, it's about identifying very specific goals and strategies to achieve those specific goals. Another huge part of IRT is really just this idea of promoting recovery. And it's really by identifying the individual's strengths and enhancing kind of that self-management skills. We'll talk a little bit more about the strengths. And I think it's something that IRT does really, really well is helping these young individuals really pull out some strengths that they may not have been aware of for themselves. And then how do we connect those goals and how do we connect those strengths that you've identified to really achieving some of those goals that you have for yourself? So very much like IMR and really that client-centered goal is going to be really crucial for that long-term success within the program and kind of that long-term success in regards to the road to recovery. So just real quickly, just like I showed in here, the clinical guidelines, obviously we talked about the goals, the various handouts within each of the clinical guidelines, the agenda setting, tips for common problems, teaching strategies, and evaluating gains. And after each clinical, towards the end of each clinical guideline, they have this evaluating gains. And I think this is really important to pull out because it's always going to be embedded throughout all the IRT modules. And this is about really reviewing the individual strengths and really reinforcing kind of their self-empowerment and really connecting their strengths with their goals. So you as the clinician are going to be constantly reminded of the importance of connecting goals to client strengths and vice versa, and really making those connections. In regards to the client handouts, there's lots of content that you're going to be going through, lots of questions to be able to pose to clients that you're going to be working with. There's always suggested home practice, like we talked about with EIMR. It is not homework. Homework always has very negative connotations. So it is home practice. And when I talked about getting other team members involved, this is really important in regards to IRT and making IRT successful is how do I get some of my other team members involved with some of this home practice? If you're working with clients that don't have a ton of natural supports, how can some other members in the team kind of be a natural support to really piggyback and support some of that home practice assignments? And then just some key messages in regards to just some summary boxes and really reviewing after each topic. What is it that the client learned? A client's able to put things in their own words. How do you make sense of what we talked about today? And really just providing some very key summary points for each specific module and topic. When we talk about session length and frequency, similar to EIMR, this is going to be roughly between 45 to 60 minutes. Even 30 minutes is really appropriate depending on how a client's doing. This is something that can be done weekly or bi-weekly, obviously kind of pacing where your client's at. And anywhere from 4 to 6 months for some of the standardized modules, and more of the individualized modules might take a little bit more time. And let's just quickly look at some of the curriculum and content. A lot of these are going to look pretty familiar in regards to some of the same modules that you might find in IMR or EIMR. And part of the reason for that is that we know that EIMR works really well, but some of those same authors that created the IMR content are also the same authors that put together the IRT modules as well. So there's definitely just a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities. The orientation, so we have the name of the standard module and then the session numbers and belongs in regards to how many sessions it might take to get through some of this stuff. So if we look at the orientation, that's anywhere from 1 to 2 sessions. When we talk about education about psychosis, this is something that's embedded throughout the entire curriculum. So you're always going to be having conversations and educating clients specifically about psychosis. And then some different modules in regards to processing the psychotic episode, resiliency, and kind of building a bridge to your goals. And then more of what's referred to as more of the individualized modules. These are things that are always going to be in the forefront in regards to negative feelings and how do we deal with them. Substance use is obviously a topic that we're talking about a ton during IRT. What is the impact that drugs and alcohol might have had on your psychotic experience? What impact is drugs and alcohol having and some of the symptoms that you're still experiencing? How are we going to develop a relapse? And is abstaining from marijuana use something that you want to do, or what is that going to look like? So providing lots of education around that's always going to be on the forefront throughout the curriculum. Some of my favorite modules through here are just having fun and developing relationships. Be mindful that with IRT, it embeds a lot of different interventions, lots of motivational interviewing, very much a harm reduction approach, but it really encompasses a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy for psychosis. So a lot of CBTP skills. A lot of the later skills are really going to be around cognitive restructuring. It's going to be more of some of those advanced CBTP skills. So when we talk about consultation, definitely some additional support that you're going to be wanting to get from the training team down the road as you begin to implement some more of these advanced CBTP skills. But these having fun and developing relationships are fantastic modules and topics that can really begin to help clients with some of that behavioral activation that we talk about in CBTP. And these are other really great times to get some of your other team members involved. I'm not going to go into details of what those look like. I'll let you guys kind of look through those at a later time. So when we talk about how does IRT help people experiencing psychosis, there's a lot of different ways. Obviously, it's the coordination with supported employment is huge, not just with supported employment, but also just providing family education and the role that meds have. For you vocational specialists, helping a client through IRT is super important, and your role as the vocational specialist is going to be absolutely paramount to getting the clients moving forward. When we think of this younger population, many of them are enrolled in school, had recently be dropped out of school or no longer going to school. Many of them have been employed and really struggling with that employment piece. And so as you guys begin to develop and begin to see younger population on some of your PACT teams, it is going to be really important for you vocational specialists to get involved in the treatment with these young people immediately. Connect with Kyle as he can kind of develop some of the strategies that you'll be using with somebody that's maybe just recently dropped out of school and they need to get back in. That's going to look a lot different from somebody who hasn't been in school in 15 or 20 years. And so really connect with Kyle, get a sense of like, what are the things I need to be aware of with somebody who might have an outstanding balance because they dropped out of school. That's going to look different. Accommodations are going to look different. Maybe it's helping an individual in regards to getting some disability support at the disability office at the college. So the nuances, just from a vocational sense and an educational sense, are going to be drastically different than some of your long-term clients. So be in contact with Kyle to really gain some additional support on what this is going to look like. The prioritization of personal goals, really, really important in regards to getting away from more of those team-driven or clinical goals to what are the client's specific goals for themselves. Maybe it's getting back into work or some school. Flexibility in treatment. This is something that you PACT teams are doing a really, really good job at. It's something that's just naturally embedded in PACT. It's just that flexibility. So this is something that will be really natural for many of you. Education about psychosis is provided concurrently with opportunities to process this experience. I think this is something that's really, really exciting about IRT. For some of you MHPs that really like doing more of that process work, I think you'll really enjoy some of the modules and helping a client walk through some of those psychotic experiences, really beginning to develop kind of a picture of what was going on in my life as I started experiencing some of these things. Was it stress related to school? Was it stress related to dating? Was it family conflict? What role did drug and alcohol play in some of these things that I'm experiencing or was experiencing? So it's a great opportunity to really kind of help a client paint a picture of what led to some of these things, but not just what led to it. Is how do I, if I have some insight on what led to it, how do I avoid some of these symptoms from consistently occurring in my life? Or if I'm noticing some of these things, what can I do to kind of avoid it from taking me down to a point where I'm getting hospitalized or needing additional treatment? Family involvement is crucial, obviously focusing on strengths and resiliency, and really just instilling that kind of sense of hope and optimism about recovery. Because recovery is going to look a lot different oftentimes for these younger individuals. Recovery can be a lot quicker. You know, we've had some great wins on new journeys and with some of these younger people on PACT, where with some really consistent wraparound care for anywhere from 9 months to a year, I've seen a lot of these younger PACT clients really transition more into an outpatient-based program, getting back into school, getting back into work, and have done really, really well. And they didn't necessarily need to cycle through the mental health system because there was a strong PACT team doing some of these early interventions that can really kind of change the trajectory for somebody's long-term recovery. What I want to do is I want to just kind of read through this quick case study, and I just want to talk about some of these early kind of modules and just talk about what it would look like from a particular case study. So this case study is kind of a combination of a handful of different PACT and New Journey clients that I've worked with over the years. So I just want to quickly read through this, and then we'll kind of talk about some of the specific early modules and topics that will hopefully kind of put these two together a little bit more. Before I keep going, do you have any questions before we keep moving? Okay. So Billy is a single 25-year-old male who was diagnosed as having schizophrenia 2 years prior to his admittance onto the PACT team. He grew up as the youngest of 3 children in a middle-class family. Billy described himself as having many friends during his childhood and was involved in many extracurricular activities in high school and was a straight A student. Prior to his diagnosis of schizophrenia, he had no other mental health diagnoses or mental health treatment, but did acknowledge feeling depressed at times. He was a talented piano player and was active in his high school's arts community. While in his first year of college, family started noticing a change in his psychosocial functioning, socially withdrawing, failing to keep his part-time job, stopped attending classes, and eventually dropping out of school. Billy also started smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol during this time. During the onset of Billy's illness, he began to experience a range of persecutory delusions that often centered on his physical health, stating that people were coming for him and that he was being poisoned. He noted strange physical sensations that he believed were a result of the poison. His family took him to a mental health clinic where Billy was diagnosed with schizophrenia and started taking medications, which he took sporadically. Billy pursued medical assistance for physical sensations for over a year, attempting to convince hospital staff and family that he was being poisoned and requesting medical attention. He was eventually detained due to erratic and aggressive behavior while at the ED and was transferred to an inpatient hospital. It was following this hospitalization that Billy was referred to the first episode psychosis team, but did not meet eligibility criteria and was soon admitted to the PACT team. So when we talk about Billy and we talk about maybe this individual comes onto your team, maybe your team decides, hey, this would be a great candidate to do a little more early psychosis work and do a little more IRT work. So it's important we talk about this kind of early work with a client. It's really about kind of assessing the distress that they might be at and really focusing on building that therapeutic relationship. It's helping him understand what he can benefit from participating in IRT and really what he can benefit from participating in PACT services. This is going to be using a lot of motivational interviewing. This is going to be a lot of befriending. This is going to be a lot of normalizing to kind of get them on board. And here's something that I think I've learned about working with this younger population. Coming from PACT to New Journeys, I kind of had this assumption that like, hey, I've got this figured out. I've been on PACT for 5-6 years. This population, I've got it. It's not going to be an issue. And I was absolutely awestruck as I started working with this younger population. It's very much a different perspective that we need to go to in regards to some of the treatment modalities that we're going to be using, and even just our own perspective. And I think one of the things that stood out the most with this younger population is that there definitely is less of a stigma when it comes to getting help for addressing some of their mental health. Many of these individuals have helped their own family or helped their own friends with some mental health challenges. And so there very much is an openness to talk about some of these mental health challenges and using it within language that makes sense to them. If they're not referring it to psychosis, it's a spiritual thing, use that language. Very much getting away from medical language of psychosis to more experiences that you're having. Can you talk more about the experiences that you're having? And what's really great about IRT is it's really great about just kind of looking at the individual holistically. Jeff talked a little bit about this in the training last week, and he's going to be talking a little bit more about this in our upcoming CBTP training. But really trying to look at clients and kind of getting away from some of that medical model approach to treatment. And that's what's really neat about IRT is it really does take a client holistically in their experiences and really kind of coming up with some really good treatment modalities that's going to work with them across different specific life domains and not just addressing mental health challenges. So when we talk about building this therapeutic relation and getting him on board, it's just asking really pointed questions about what it is that your team can provide. Is this something that you'd be interested in being a part of, Billy? This is something that we do. We're really good at it. And providing just other examples from other clients and other experiences that can really kind of get him interested in participating with the team. When we talk about kind of assessment and goal setting with Billy, it's really about identifying character strengths. And I do want to show this. How are we doing on time? All right, we'll get through this pretty quick. So when we talk about strengths, I think it's one of the things that IRT does absolutely the best at. So when we go to the module, we want to refer to as strength evaluation, talking about identifying strengths. And this is probably one of the most important things you'll do in IRT early on in the process, because it really sets a framework of what are these individual strengths? How does this individual identify the strengths for themselves? And how are we going to use those strengths to overcome some of the challenges and barriers that they might be experiencing in their recovery? So it's just a rating scale of 0 to 10, and it just provides them with a prompt. So think of an actual situation in which you have the opportunity to do something that was novel or innovative. How often did you use creativity or ingenuity in these situations? So later on in the module, we'll describe in more detail what creativity, ingenuity looks like if a client needs some additional support in this. But if we think of Billy in this situation, what do we know about Billy? We know that Billy is a really gifted piano player. So part of the conversation with Billy is talking about how is piano playing, how do you use creativity and ingenuity in this, Billy? Talk to me a little bit about this. And you'll be really surprised and amazed about how well clients respond to identifying some of these strengths. And clients will repeatedly say, hey, I had no idea that was a strength. And just giving them some language about some of the different personality characters that they have will really kind of foster this opportunity to really kind of build on some of those strengths. So if you think of number 4, think of an actual situation in which you have the opportunity to learn. How often did you show love of learning? So what do you know about Billy? He was a college student. Maybe he was a music major in college. Talk to me, Billy, about what it is that you loved about college. What would it look like to get back into college? So these are just great opportunities to really kind of identify what are these clients' strengths and how are we going to use those strengths to kind of move them forward. Just for time rise, there's also another one down here. It's called satisfaction with areas in my life. It's just opportunities. It's just kind of like areas in my life and satisfying areas in my life. So friendships, am I satisfied? Am I moderately satisfied? Very satisfied? Would like to change. This is something that clients can kind of walk through. This is a great opportunity to begin creating some goals on these areas of my life. And it can really also begin to pull out some of those strengths. So expressing creativity, maybe that's a strength of mine, but I'm not really satisfied with where I'm at. So in Billy's situation, he's like, well, I'm not playing the piano. I'm not writing any music, but I know that's a strength and I'm not satisfied in that particular life domain. So what's it going to take to kind of express that in more of a goal-oriented way? Just a couple more things before we wrap up. Just when you think of these young individuals that you're going to be working with, you have to kind of think of recovery in this way. And this is a slide that I would often share with young adults when I'm working with them, is that they're kind of standing on this track and they have no idea which way to go. They have no idea what's coming at them or where they're supposed to go. They have all this different stimuli. They have a lot of pressures of parents, school, work, friendships, social media kind of coming at them. And there's just an uncertainty on where to go. So the whole goal with IRT is really kind of helping them find some stability and really helping them find, where am I going? I know I'm walking this direction in my life. I may not know what's around the corner, but I know what recovery looks like. And for me, it's going to be, in Billy's situation, maybe it's doing the things that I used to do. So maybe for Billy, it's about getting back to playing the piano. Maybe it's getting back to college and spending some time with family and friends. So it's going to look different for everybody. And it's going to look different than just symptom elimination. It's really that holistic approach that we're going to be taking in working with clients. I am going to just show you just some goal setting things really quick. And this is just an example when we talk about goal setting. And what's great about IRT is it breaks it down really well, similar to IMR. And I just want to kind of give you an example of what goal setting would look like with Billy. So this will all be within your IRT modules, and it's really just breaking down goals into very manageable steps. So let's quickly look at this example. So maybe for Billy, his goal is I want to enroll into a class or enroll in class at a community college. So we're going to be breaking down these into very short-term goals to make this manageable. So maybe the first goal is that he needs to meet with the voc specialist. So what are the steps that Billy and I are going to work with in session? Well, maybe the first step is that Billy's gonna work with Andre to have him introduce him to Kyle, the vocational specialist, right? So that's the first step. So maybe I get that set up with Billy, and maybe Kyle comes into session and I do an introduction. So the next part for that meeting with the voc specialist is that Billy needs to have a session with Kyle about work and school, and what does that specifically look like? So then we're kind of each week we're evaluating Did we fully achieve that particular short-term goal, or do we need to make some modified steps to that? Maybe the second short-term goal is I need to talk with my parents about going back to school. So maybe the short-term goals or steps that we're going to take is we're going to plan on having parents join a session with me and Billy. So Billy, prior to that session, is going to write down what I want to tell my parents. Maybe he has something he needs to get off his chest about some challenges he had at school. So all of these short-term goals and all of these steps are all directly connecting to Billy's personal, meaningful goal of enrolling into a class at a community college. And then step 3 is I'm going to meet with a college counselor about enrolling in school. So what are the different steps he needs to do for that? Maybe it's just walking around the school and getting comfortable being in a new environment. Maybe he had some really challenges with some symptoms while he was at school. So maybe he just needs to go back there and get comfortable. These are all behavioral activation skills that you can be working with. Maybe it's doing an online search. Maybe it's talking with Kyle, the book specialist, about what it was going to take to meet with the disability office or meet with a guidance counselor at the school. So these are just all examples. The IRT module will walk you through very specifically how to write and roll out these short-term goals. And like we've talked about in other trainings, it's just make these very much client-centered goals. This doesn't have to be about symptom elimination. This is a very specific goal that is very specific to what Billy or what the client really wants to begin working on.